Hello, everyone. We will be starting in a couple of minutes.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey, everyone. We will be starting in about 2 to 3 minutes. Thanks. Happy Tuesday, everybody, and thank you for joining us this morning for our monthly advocacy webinar. I am JP Dorval, Manager of Legislative Affairs and Administrative Services here at Prevention Action Alliance. And with me today, we have Marcie Seidel, our Executive Director, and also we have Marcie Wolff, who will be a panelist, and I will introduce her again later. But first thing up on the agenda for today's webinar is an update on House Bill 166. Oh, and it seems like, give me 1 second. All right. Yes, House Bill 166, the Biennial Budget, and just wanted to give you guys an update on that. So the House last week passed a version of the bill. The House passed it last Thursday, May 9th, and it got voted out of the House with an 85-9 vote. For the most part, this bill closely resembles what the governor's recommendations were for the General Assembly when he gave those recommendations back a couple months prior. The good thing is that it seems like behavioral health and everything within that category weathered the budget cut storm, so to speak, when it comes to budget cuts that the House put into the bill. One thing that's not necessarily related to us, but that may come to, of interest to us later as the bill is now in the Senate, is the House did put in a bunch of tax changes. An example of it would be the House removed the bottom 2 brackets when it comes to income tax. So the bottom 2 income tax brackets the House eliminated, and also changed how the small business tax affected people at the upper levels of the income brackets as well. So just a few things, a few cuts here and there, but for the most part, behavioral health was able to weather the storm, which means prevention and mental health services and everything under Ohio MOS and the Department of Health stayed intact. So that's always nice to hear. So now I'm going to officially introduce Marcie Wolff, and she is the Director for Coalition for Drug-Free Clermont. And today Marcie will discuss the Ohio Prevention Advocacy Network, which is a group that was recently created, and also just advocacy happenings that are happening during this part of the year. So Marcie, ready when you are.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm very happy to have everyone who's joining us today on the line. And I'm always happy to talk about how important advocacy is. It's one of the things that I think we all talk about it. We all know we need to do it, but it becomes scary because we're all afraid that perhaps we're crossing a line, or where does lobbying end and advocacy begin, or are we going to do something that's going to hurt our funding? So we tend to shy away from it, when quite frankly, as subject matter experts in prevention, we can be a real, an absolute partner with our elected officials on better understanding how things work. And that's really what I hope people will begin to think about, is how can I work with an elected official? So OPAN has been created to really talk about, from a state perspective, how can we really make prevention stand out? How do we start to toot our own horn? Because it's so easy with competing interests in the world to get lost. But I think that prevention has risen up in the last probably 5 to 10 years, and certainly within the most recent epidemic that we've had an opportunity to really discuss more about how important prevention is, because in some respects the lack of prevention, primary prevention, and certainly in our schools and in our youth, contributed somewhat to the situation we have now, where nobody was really doing anything. And or at best, what they were doing was scare tactics and not helpful. So that's kind of all I have at the moment. Do we want to, JP, do we want to do questions, or what else do you want me to talk about?
Hey, Mary, that is a great question. We usually tend to do the questioning portion of the webinar towards the end.
Okay.
So if you're going to hold on, if you're going to be present for the entire webinar, we
Yes.
can always circle back to you if anyone has specific questions for you over OPAN. But just echoing on what you just said, advocacy is important, and we really need to get involved. And this Thursday, the Ohio Prevention Advocacy Network is planning to testify on the budget, and also Prevention Action Alliance as well. When it comes to things that we're advocating for, generally our train of thought is the budget as it stands right now is great. However, we still need more funds. We still need increased investment into prevention if the state really wants to combat the public health crises that we're seeing currently, and also combat future public health crises. So that's something that we're going to advocate for, and Mary will actually be testifying. So I just want to thank you again, Mary, for that.
No
and yes, yeah, and when it comes to Prevention Action Alliance, and this is still in discussion, obviously we want to echo what OPAN is saying when it comes to increased funding, increased investment. However, we also want to focus in on Tobacco 21, and that's something that has really come to the forefront for the state over the last couple of weeks. I know the governor has gotten involved. There are a bunch of stakeholder meetings happening throughout the state on Tobacco 21, and really it's a national conversation about how do we combat vaping and juuling and these things that really flew under the radar for so long, and now we're really starting to see that it's a problem. As a lot of high school students, I know some high schoolers say 50+% of their class vapes, and that number increases once you go to college. And we've heard that from students themselves. This isn't just us pulling these numbers out of the air. So really, vaping is a crisis, and I know that a lot of coalition members of our SPECA group have voiced those concerns about vaping and want us to do something about it. So for those of you who don't know, the governor did include Tobacco 21 language in his version of the budget, in his recommendations. And it seems like the House kept those, tweaked a few things that were just legislative changes, but I have no idea what that sound is. Give me a second. Yeah, sorry. People calling. The House did tweak some of the language, but I think it was just more of a legal fix, and fixes when it comes to definitions of vaping and tobacco, and whether it's something that combusts or whether it's something that's vaporized, things like that. But that is in the House bill as of right now. Now, the one thing that a lot of coalition members are concerned about is that the language isn't strong enough. There is a lot of so as of right now, it seems like the onus is on the individuals who are purchasing, as opposed to the onus being on the individuals who both purchase and sell. So that is a problem that really allows the sellers to get off the hook, so to speak. And because of that, we're seeing a lot of vaping companies actually support the language that's currently in budgets, not only in Ohio, but in budgets throughout the country. So that is a fight. And I think after we have some internal discussions and we plan on how we want to attack that, I believe that that is something that Prevention Action Alliance will try to make a stand on. And for the most part, the General Assembly is pretty cognizant of that issue. And it seems like they will be willing to work with us on that. So Mary, once again, thank you. And if anyone has any questions for Mary, yes.
I just wanted to also add in about, so many people are writing for DFC right now, and I want to kind of make clear something that I think people need to understand. So if you're writing a DFC and you want to talk about dealing with vaping, vaping is a transmission mode. It's a mechanism. DFCs are about substances. What you actually need to talk about is either that you're working on tobacco or you're working on marijuana, and then you dovetail through the vaping that way. Because I think we can get lost. What gets lost is that people focus on the actual mechanism, when what DFC is wanting to look at is what is in the mechanism. What are the substances that we know our youth are using? And I think for Ohio, the piece with the fact that our legislation for medicinal marijuana requires vaping, which becomes more problematic in Ohio, that we now have this epidemic of our youth using, e-cigarettes and vapes. And so I think that just to kind of caution people, if you're writing, don't say, well, I'm going to do an action plan around a vape. What you really need to do an action plan around is liquid nicotine or marijuana, and how that mechanism, how that's affecting your youth that way, if that's helpful to people.
Mary, that is a great point, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
No problem.
So that's very nice. But if anyone has any questions for Mary, she'll be here. Other than that, we can move on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Sure.
All right, everyone. So the next thing up for the agenda are a couple bills that I want everyone to keep an eye out for. One of them is Senate Bill 57, the Hemp Bill, decriminalizes hemp and hemp products in Ohio. And also a lot of legislators are trying to push for adding CBD oil and CBD products to this bill. So just keep an eye out on that. Obviously, we discussed House Bill 166, which is the Biennial Budget. Has a lot of things. That's where the state, this is the plan that the state has to fund the, all state agencies and things like that for the next 2 years. So that's obviously important. That has Packet 21 language in there as well. So keep an eye out on that. Once again, we will be testifying this Thursday. So keep an eye out for that. And if anyone is interested in testifying, feel free to reach out to me. I can work with you, can try to get you in there or have you submit written only testimony. Just as a reminder, providing testimony on a bill is not lobbying, it is advocacy. So I just want to make sure that people understand that. I know people are a bit wary to go into the General Assembly and say anything because of the distinction between lobbying and advocacy and how much of a gray area that is. but testifying for a bill is advocacy. So if you're interested, just let me know. The next two bills, Senate Bill 1, which is a regulations bill, which requires agencies to reduce the number of regulatory restrictions. Now, this might not seem like it's important. However, the issue with this is the General Assembly is requiring all state agencies, so we're talking about Ohio Moss, Department of Health, all state agencies to reduce their rules and regulations, so the things that are in the Ohio Administrative Code, by 30%. So it's a 30% slash. So if an agency introduces a rule, it has to try to get rid of 2. I think that's what people are saying. And this is an issue, right? You know, you can't tell all agencies to have an arbitrary cut or cut, arbitrarily a certain percentage of all their rules and regulations, because every agency is different. Some agencies deal with health, such as the Ohio Department of Health, Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. If you ask them to arbitrarily cut rules and regulations, they might have more rules than other agencies or less. So it'll affect some agencies more than others. It's a huge mess. And this might end up affecting our field greatly if it gets passed the way that it is right now. So that's why I included that. That's something to keep an eye out on. And I don't know of any agencies that are supportive of this as of right now. I think everyone has concerns. So, and I do know that the Senate President is behind this. So this does have some traction. So just keep an eye out for that. The last bill I want to highlight is Senate Bill 121, the Health Education Standards Bill. And Senator Sykes' office actually reached out to us, and we are officially stakeholders on that bill. The bill already had a sponsor testimony, so Senator Sykes and Senator Coons already gave testimony on that, and the next step is to give proponent testimony, so testimony in support of the bill. And I know that Prevention Action Alliance, along with a bunch of other organizations, are stakeholders and are planning to provide proponent testimony on that bill when that time comes around. So keep an eye out on that. Obviously, we need education standards. Ohio is the only state in the country without education standards. So this is something that we strongly support and that we are going to push for. I want to circle back before I pass along to Marcie to Senate Bill 57, which is now substitute Senate Bill 57, since they introduced a substitute version of that bill. And I just want to give you guys an update of what we are trying to do. I do know that a few coalitions here and there are a bit confused on our ask and are a bit confused as to why we're getting so involved in Senate Bill 57. And really, it's simply this. When the state introduced the medical marijuana control program and introduced medical marijuana into, the state and their communities, 3 years ago, I think we really missed the mark to educate people on what these things do to the body, their legality, and things of that nature. So we at Prevention Action Alliance see substitute Senate Bill 57 as another avenue to get this cannabis educational campaign, the statewide cannabis educational campaign, up and running, so that we can educate people on, CBD oils, the FDA-approved CBD or marijuana derivative drugs, hemp, the difference between medical marijuana and marijuana. We want to be able to educate people on these things, both at the most basic level, and also our lawmakers as well. You have a couple lawmakers who don't even understand that medical marijuana has THC in it. So these are things that concern us. And really, at the end of the day, we're just trying to see if we can get our cannabis educational campaign through this bill, since hemp is a derivative of cannabis. So that's what we're trying to do. We haven't received much pushback verbally from this. We are planning to testify, I believe, next week if they have this bill up for testimony. I've been in conversation with Representative Kaler's office. Representative Kaler is the chair of the Agricultural and Rural Development Committee in the House. So I have been in conversation with his office, and we are planning to testify on that. But at the end of the day, that's really what we are trying to do. And I'm sure Marcie would like to elaborate on that as well. But that is at its most basic level what our ask is. So now I will pass it to Marcie.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to be with you on this Tuesday morning, and it's a beautiful day in Columbus, and hope it is where you are too. As you can tell from JP and from Mary, there's a lot of things popping here in Central Ohio around advocacy and around issues that are important to all of us. And so we are not without a lot to do, and we're excited to have so many good partners join us in this educational process. The first thing, just to follow up a little bit with JP about the hemp bill, this is an opportunity for us to bring up, or at least introduce, if not only to get it into process where we actually start to move forward, what an educational system must look like around the new cannabis territory that we're all facing at this point. We feel that this is one of the most important things that the state of Ohio has to do now. We felt that the legislature was remiss in not doing this in the first bill, as JP said, and certainly here's an opportunity to introduce this concept back again. When I talk to individuals at almost any level, from whether they are senators or representatives to friends and relatives and people on the street, there is so much confusion about marijuana and about cannabis. If you ask somebody, what is marijuana? What does it look like now? Not many people can tell you. What is marijuana and how is it different from medical marijuana? How is medical marijuana different from cannabis? Or is it different from cannabis? What is marijuana and medical marijuana, and cannabis? How is that different than CBD oil? And how is that different from FDA-approved medical marijuana products? I mean, there's just, and how is it all different from hemp? And so not very many people, I know, can give you that kind of a degree of knowledge about it. And there's a lot of misconception and misinformation out in the society about it. A lot of that has to come from an industry that's trying to make a lot of money and to paint a rosy picture is exactly what they want. They want this to be the elixir that fixes everything in the world. And if you listen to people, they probably will tell you that this will fix everything in the world. And we know that that's not true. So really we need to create a source of really good information that people can go to and know it's trusted and getting facts and not just someone's hope for what a product is like. So that's our goal. And whether it will go in the hemp bill, I have no idea. And it may or may not. But what it will do, and we're guaranteed of it, it introduces the conversation to the right people. And they'll be taking a look at this, whether they like it or not. We have introduced it through testimony. So that's where we're going with it. And once we start to do it, as JP says, we'll keep you updated about it. But we encourage you to help support us in this effort to keep that conversation going and to get a really good educational campaign going in the state of Ohio around cannabis. Now for the Ohio Medical Marijuana Control Program, we're just kind of a brief update since last month. Cultivators-wise, we're still at the same, levels that we were, other than one level 2. We have an additional one that has a certificate of operation. So we're up to 9 now in level 2. And then in dispensaries, since last month, we have increased by 2 additional dispensaries. So they're starting to roll out in the state of Ohio, all of the processes in it. We have also here the sales figures. So you can see here that we've had 750 pounds of plant material that was sold and distributed in the last, basically since the beginning of January through the 5th of May. And that compared to last month, we've more than doubled. So in the last month, we've more than doubled the amount of plant material and almost doubled we more than doubled the sales of the material, and we've doubled the plant material. So this is starting to become more and more marijuana is being put into our communities and into the hands of individuals who have medical marijuana recommendations. So it is, as you can see here, it's growing quite steadily. The recommendations here are growing quite as well. Since last month, the number of recommendations has gone up almost 6,000. And the registered patients with recommendations has gone up by 6,500 individuals. So people can get the recommendations, but the people who are registered that are actually going into the system, registering and being able to purchase it, kind of still lags behind the total recommendations by about a little more than 3,000 individuals. I believe last month there was a question about why is that, and I think we answered we don't know, and I still don't know. But I also know that that people may be just trying to figure out how easy it might be to get it. They might be figuring out if they get a recommendation, it's kind of like a safe card that they have, and they don't have to act on it. But if they get stopped for marijuana, they've got this card. So it's a little hard to tell what's going on with it, and I don't know that we'll ever really know unless we can figure out a good way to do some research on that. As you can see here underneath the patients with recommendations, we are the veteran status is going up. It went up by more than 400 individuals in the last month. Patients with the indigent status is going up by more than 300. And then this, I think, is still very interesting to me, is that of all the people, of the 28,000 individuals that have received your recommendation, there's only 171 that have actually had a terminal diagnosis. And again, if you can pull back into a memory banks about why this was sold, this was the biggest reason it was sold to the public, was that people are dying and they needed to be at peace and restful and in a good spot. And yet that's a very, very small number of individuals who are actually using it for that. Caregivers has gone up as well, as you can see on the chart here. And they've gone up by about 620 individuals, and from last month. Physicians too have gone up as well. We have we're up to almost 500 physicians around the state of Ohio. They still are very much concentrated in the large cities in Ohio, but the numbers of those are beginning to grow. This is the final piece I'd like to talk about in medical marijuana today is the fact that we just went through a process in the last part of 2018 where people could recommend additional qualifying conditions that would be considered. The Ohio Medical Board is in charge of that portion of the control program, and they received numerous different recommendations or requests for additional conditions, and they came down to 5. And the 5 would be the autism spectrum disorder, anxiety, depression, insomnia, and opiate use disorder. They convened panels of experts that, and I haven't read the experts' information yet. I plan to do that. It's on the website of the Ohio Medical Board if you're interested. And, just Google the Ohio Medical Board, and you can go on to their site and look at what they are. But they are recommending, there was a committee that met. This particular committee was reviewing all of these things, and they narrowed it down to 2 from 5, claiming that they believe that there were some reasons to go ahead and recommend autism spectrum disorder and anxiety, and that the other 3 were not recommending them because they didn't believe that the material supported it. On June 12th, they will go to the full medical board for and be presented, where they will vote on them to see whether those 2, autism and anxiety, will be included in the other 21 areas of qualifying conditions. I think I'm speechless because I can't imagine that autism and anxiety, in fact, I spoke with a recovering individual yesterday who said the last thing in the world when she was an active user would be to take marijuana when she was having an anxiety attack. That she said there was no way that would have helped her, and in fact would have hindered her. And I think there's a lot of research out there that might show the opposite of it. I'm not sure. I've got conflicting meetings that day, but I'm kind of hoping that I can clear my schedule and get to that meeting to see what's going on. I think this is a dangerous level to be because there's not enough research. It hasn't gone through all the proper testing needed to be able to recommend something like this, especially when you look at autism and you're looking at children and children's growing brains. I'm, as I said, I am not at all comfortable with what's going on, and this will be something that we at Prevention Action Alliance will be digging into more. And as a member of the Medical Marijuana Advisory Commission, one can be assured that I will raise a lot of concern about it at our meetings. So that's all that I have at this point, and I'm going to turn it back to JP, and we'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Marcie. And yeah, so if anyone has any questions, we'll hang around for the next couple of minutes. I know Mary's still on the line, so if you have questions for her specifically, feel free to shoot those over to me. So I guess we'll wait it out. All right, well, it does not seem like we have any questions today, so I'm going to wrap things up. Everyone, if you aren't subscribed to our legislative update emails, we send those out every Tuesday, and that's really where we give that is the avenue we take to give everyone a week-by-week progress update on what we're doing here at PAA when it comes to advocacy. So if you have not signed up for that, please do. Once again, keep an eye out for any emails regarding testimony that PAA sends out. We'll be giving testimony this Thursday. And if you're interested in giving testimony or submitting written testimony, because I do know that committee hearings tend to be at inopportune times for the average working person. So if you want to submit testimony, you can't be there in person, but just want to have it on the record and submit it as written testimony only, send it over to me. Send me an email, send Marcie an email, and we can definitely get that up on the committee site for you and send it over to the committee so that they have that in front of them. But Mary, thank you so much. Marcie, thank you so much. It was a really productive advocacy webinar. We shared a lot of information. Hopefully we didn't overwhelm anyone. I know there's a lot going on right now during this time of the year, but thanks again, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.